All right, Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thanks for that report. I do want to talk more about this now, this growing war of words between Russia and Turkey, and how this could affect the anti-ISIS mission in Syria. Joining me now to talk about this is Congressman Jim Himes. He's a Democrat from Connecticut. He's a member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, and he's a former member of the Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thanks for being with us. And
Hi,
what do you see the role of the U.S. in all of this? We know that Erdogan, Putin, President Obama, they're all going to be in France on Monday for this climate summit. Do you see this as an opportunity for the U.S. to get involved, or does the U.S. need to stay out of this dispute?
Well, I think particularly in the case of the Russian-Turkish issue with the shooting down of the Russian plane, the U.S. can play a calming role. You know, that's a sort of a step backwards away from where we all, and by all I mean basically everybody except ISIS, needs to be, which is getting their heads together, really committing to the negotiations that are underway right now in Vienna, because it is only once there has been an agreement about, you know, what Syria looks like in the next couple of years that we then have the alignment to do what we all so badly want to do, which is, of course, and with the French, go after ISIS. You know, as long as we have, you know, Turks shooting down Russians, you know, Iranians operating independently of, you know, of each other, and the U.S. not quite sure who's doing what to where, it's going to be very, very difficult to come up with the alignment that we need ultimately to defeat ISIS.
I want to ask you, sort of to that point about political transition in Syria. The French foreign minister has caused some confusion this morning. He said that Syrian government forces could be part of the ground force against ISIS. Then he clarified, he said they would take part only after a political transition. In the mind of the U.S., from your perspective, is there really a role for the Syrian military?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question because, of course, one of the catastrophic mistakes that the United States made in Iraq after the invasion was to dismantle the Iraqi armed forces. And, boy, did we ever pay the price for the fact that you had, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of newly unemployed Iraqi soldiers without a paycheck, with weaponry, and with military training. Absolute catastrophe. So the answer is pretty clear that once an agreement is made, and that agreement will include an easing out of Assad, and, boy, do we wish it wasn't an easing out, but it will include an easing out of an Assad, then necessarily there will be a hard look at the officers and the commanders of the Syrian military. Those that committed war crimes or atrocities obviously won't be part of the future of Syria. But those who are not, you know, the fact that that military is there will, once all those agreements are made and once we've sort of found out, you know, who the bad guys are and they get held accountable, then absolutely there's a role in a post-Assad Syria for the Syrian military.
You have said that efforts to end this civil war in Syria could involve working with some unsavory characters. I know you're talking about easing out Assad, but does that include working with Iran, perhaps Hezbollah?
Well, you know, it doesn't involve working with Hezbollah. What I mean by working with unsavory characters is, yes, Iran is there in at least 3 different forms. They're there with Hezbollah, they're there with Shiite militias, and they're there actually with their own Revolutionary Guard operational in the country. So whether we like it or not, they have a seat at the negotiating table. And of course, they're right there in the region. So no, it's not so much that we're going to work with Hezbollah. It's going to be the fact that the final deal that gets done here is going to be profoundly uncomfortable for a lot of us because, you know, sadly, it's not likely to end with Assad spending the rest of his life in jail, as he should, although who knows. And, you know, the Iranians are going to get something in that negotiation, as will the Russians, by the way. So, like all negotiations, we're going to get a deal that's going to be terribly important to aligning ISIS. But there's going to be aspects of that deal that are going to be pretty uncomfortable to us.
And what about Assad? Obviously, the line of the U.S. government is that he needs to go. But at the same, on the same token, I think other countries are asking themselves the question, which is the lesser evil here, ISIS or Bashar al-Assad?
Yeah, no, and frankly, that's been a question that has been, you know, part of the problem with U.S. strategy for a long time. I mean, you know, Assad's violence and the, you know, absolutely atrocious way in which he ran the country has a lot to do with ISIS's success in that country. On the other hand, you know, I sort of looked at some senior White House administration officials a year ago, and I said, really? If you could push a button today and Assad would be gone, would you push that button? Because, of course, who's in Damascus if Assad is gone? Now, the good news is, look, let's face it. You know, Assad is an embarrassment to the people who are backing him. He's an embarrassment to the Russians. He's an embarrassment to the Iranians. So, you know, they too have an interest in us, in Assad being gone. But again, you can't just wish the man away, and you can't snap your fingers and have a vacuum in Damascus, because if there's a vacuum in Damascus, I promise you it's going to look like the vacuum, you know, in Tripoli. It'll look like the vacuum in so many other cities around the region where, you know, the leadership went away and some pretty bad people moved in.
Congressman Himes, really appreciate you talking to us on this. What's really a holiday Friday. We hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend.
Yeah.